Failte raf go videola is een hasho, als je komen echt drie gaan een loch. En nu, als je dat van een woord, is goed kan het zien wat ik kan harien als een hele hasho. Kom er verder, ik wil kiel, risch een loch. Kan het jets een loch, het toch parach, en ik kan het toer een loch. Ik heb de paas kan hakken in een show. En nu, kom het zien, ik kan het toer een loch. Welcome to this video, another one from Kinloch Historical Society. Today's one is going to be very interesting in the sense that we are going to be seeing things that are very old. They have come from under the water in our island, in lochs. Things that have been there for many, many hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. And with me is the man who has found many of these items in lochs around here. He is Chris Murray. Now, if you want to know a lot about Chris, you can go to his book. He's got a book called Winchman. And while this isn't an advert, it does tell you the story of a very interesting life. Chris, water seems to have played a very important in your life from a very young age.
Yeah, it certainly has. As my father and my brother were in the Royal Navy, and I just followed in the footsteps, water, and then becoming a diver in the Royal Navy. Shortly after I joined, that was part of my life, and continued diving in the North Sea, and then on to search and rescue helicopters, which involved, of course, a lot of water as well. Most certainly did. Yes. Yeah.
Now, lochs, we're in Kinloch here, but I believe your relationship is with further deep down in South Lochs.
That's correct, yes. My late mother, she was born and bred in Maribh in South Lochs, 18 Maribh, and I spent a lot of my childhood there, probably about 7 weeks in the summer, and it became my home through the summer, that's right, yeah.
And in later life your home was in Lewis?
Yes, exactly. That's where I live now. I've been living in Lewis since 1984, and it is my home nowadays, and yeah.
So, fair enough, your father, as you said, wasn't in the Royal Navy. Diving, well, did you always want to be a diver?
No, I didn't. I didn't really. I was very interested in diving, as a lot of my older friends in Dornoch were diving for lobsters and that when I was a youngster, and I was very interested in that. But it's really when my older brother became a submariner in the Royal Navy that my interest grew into diving, really, a more professional kind in the Royal Navy. And I remember saying to him, you know, if you're diving in a submarine, well, that's fantastic, but I think I can go one better. I can go diving with a steel hull around me. And that's just precisely what I did, yeah.
So where did you learn to dive?
I learned to dive in the Royal Navy, I say, in HMS Vernon, really. That's where I started my diving course down in Portsmouth, and progressed from HMS Vernon right up way through on to HMS Kettleston, which was a mine hunter. I was a diver on board that, and then on to Faslane diving team, HMS Neptune, and again that was all one mine disposal up in the Clyde there, and we ventured all over the place, including the Western Isles and all over really, yes. And it was good. Really enjoyed that.
You say it in a very matter-of-fact voice, but nevertheless there must be an element of excitement and danger in it.
Yes, of course there is. When you're dealing with explosives, there's always an element of danger involved. We worked with explosives on a daily basis, so it just became sort of matter of fact, although very cautious all the same. We are always very cautious with explosives. But being taught well through the Royal Navy, we were very confident of what we did when working with explosives and dealing with mines, etc. Ground mines, Mark 17, buoyant mines, so on and so forth. And it was just a way of life, and we all enjoyed doing what we were doing at that time, yes.
You became a symbol of air-sea rescue here as the man at the end of the rope. Now, for anybody else that would have been seen as madness, but yet you obviously did it for 22 years.
Did that for a good number of years. I would say altogether probably about 25 years thereabouts, on and off. When I say on and off, I've taken out of retirement to continue with training other people at the end of my initial term. But as I say, well, people say, you've done a very, very dangerous job here. How can you do that? Well, the reason for that is because I volunteered for it. I wanted to become a winchman, and I volunteered for that. So how can I go out in the middle of a storm and say, oh, poor me, look at the state I'm in now, I want to go home? You can't do that sort of stuff. You can't say that. You're dealing with casualties, and they're in trouble, and you have to go. You have to be at the sharp end. You have to be there to go and rescue these people. So,
and you have been at the sharp end quite a few times.
well, very much so. But again, as I say, that's my choice, and you can't dictate what the weather's going to be when you go and rescue somebody, or how far out in the Atlantic you're going to go to rescue somebody, or how high up in a mountain you're going to be. You go and do it. You've got to use the skills that you've been taught, and I've been taught very well by ex-RAF and ex-Royal Navy professionals. So I put that skills to hand, and just carried on.
So you did the job as you were taught. Were there times afterwards when you said, whew, that was a bit hairy?
Very much so indeed. Yes, there's been quite a lot of times when I thought to myself afterwards, well, my goodness, I'm glad that's over. And even before the job started, sometimes you'd hear the winch operator saying, well, I'm very glad I'm not a winchman today. I said, well, thank you very much indeed. But once you're out that door and you're on the end of the wire, your thought changes. You don't think of anything else apart from being on the wire, doing your job, rescuing that person, regardless what the weather, and getting that person back on board the helicopter. And as I say, it is a professional job. It didn't just involve me; it involved all the crew. We all had to do our job to get to the point where one person was saved by the helicopter and the crew.
I don't know why, but the thought of a football team came to my mind. There's the goalie, defenders, midfield. But who's the most important one? The guy who scores the goals, the one at the front. And whilst the guy at the front always gives credit to the rest, you are probably quite right to give credit to the rest, but ultimately the success depends on the guy at the end of the rope.
You're on the sharp end, you're the guy at the end of the rope, but I never forget, it's the guys in the helicopter that actually put me where the spot on board a vessel or a mountain, where I want to go, and it's these people I rely on to get me safely on board. Yeah.
This was just a preamble or a prelude to the most important work you've been doing now in retirement, still diving. What on earth gave you the idea of exploring lochs in the Isle of Lewis?
Well, to cut a long story short, I was diving for scallops in Loch one day, and on the way home I decided to have a walk around a loch with my Springer Spaniel, and I spotted an island which was obviously man-made at the end of this loch, Loch Duna, just outside Ranish, and it intrigued me. It intrigued me a lot, and I thought to myself, when was that island made? Who made that island? It certainly wasn't recent anyway. And I thought to myself then, I'm going to have a dive in this loch and find out what lies beneath. Because I always watched television programmes in years gone by about finding stuff at the bottom of lochs, and mostly in America actually. It said, well, you've got to check these things out, dive the rivers, dive the lochs, and search whatever you can. If you don't search, you won't find. So this intrigued me, and down I went and I dived in these lochs, and that's where it all started. My interest began in Loch Duna in North Lochs.
Did you realise that there were going to be finds there, or did you just go purely speculatively?
Speculated really, but I had been told previously by a friend of mine, the late Mark Elliott, that these duns, as they called them, in the lochs, they were all Iron Age. So I reckoned that I would go and find out if I could find any Iron Age material around the duns in the loch there, and that's precisely what I did with the help of my cousin one day. Went and dived in that loch, and I did find bits and pieces of Iron Age material, which I took back to the house, I got a hold of Mark, my friend, and he came down and he verified it was Iron Age material, and he said, well, that falls into these categories, and that's where it is. He said, well done. He says, are you going back again to this loch? I said, yeah, I'm going back next week. I'm going to see if I find some more. And that's when it all kicked off. Yeah.
So what kind of depth of water were you working?
Maximum 15 feet in Loch Duna. That was on the east side of the loch. On the west side, it's so shallow you can't really dive in there. It's all water lily side, it's all mud, and you can't really find anything in there. But on the east side, it was sort of shingly sort of base, shingly bottom, steep sides went down to a mud base in the bottom of the loch, and it's on the slopes of that loch I was finding the Iron Age material. But the second time I dived in the loch, I decided to go into the shallow side, even just where the stones were, more to the north side of the island in the loch. And that's when I started finding the Neolithic material, although at that time I didn't really know what it was. All I knew it was big, beautiful part pots, sherds if you like to call them, that were beautifully decorated, and I didn't really know what it was. So I took them home, got a hold of my friend Mark Elliott again, and he came down, and he was gobsmacked to say the least. And he was asking where I found this stuff. And I said, well, I found it in very shallow water, about 3 feet deep, 3 to 4 feet deep. And he says, do you realise what you found here? And I says, no. I says, very fancy looking parts of pots and stuff like that. He says, my God, he says, what you have found actually is Neolithic pots, part pots. I says, and? Well, he says, do you realise the significance of this? I said, no. Well, he says, this is going to change the history of the island. In fact, it's going to change the history of Scotland as far as the Neolithic period is concerned. Neolithic people living on the island up here. He says, that is Neolithic, and probably early Neolithic, probably up to 5,000 years old. And I was, what, 5,000 years old? God, like, that's older than myself. That's somebody else, really.
So that's how it started, and you've done quite a lot since then, haven't you?
Yes, that was the start of an adventure. I would call it an adventure, really, between Mark and myself. Before I go any further, Mark Elliott was a conservationist in the museum in Stornoway, and he taught me quite a lot about various different kinds of pottery, how to recognise them, so on and so forth. And I taught him how to dive. So we went as a team, the two of us. So after we were finding stuff there, and Mark came to help me in that loch, and we did find some more stuff, smaller pieces of Neolithic again, and I have no doubt there's still an awful lot of stuff in that loch to be found. But we decided to see if we could locate some other lochs, like small crannogs and whatever. And duly, that's what we did. We carried on to find quite a lot more. Yeah.
So bits of pottery. Now we've got quite a lot of them here in front of us just now. The story, though, it's not really begun in a sense, because you know there's a lot of lochs in the moors and Lewis. There's a lot of evidence of people having lived in various parts. But things, you know, I think you're probably one of the first to have done what you've done here. That is, go under the water to find what's down there.
Well, that's right. It's hit or miss, really. I mean, I've come across what I thought was these crannogs in certain lochs in the past, and there was nothing to be found there at all. Or the water had been that black, I wouldn't be able to see anything at all. But what we did was we went on to Google Earth, and we studied the maps all over the island of Lewis and Harris, and we picked out little islands which looked like they could have been man-made, very, very round islands. They didn't look natural at all. They looked as if they had been man-made. And we checked these out, and some of them were very productive in producing, again, Neolithic material. Yeah.
So man has walked these islands for many years.
Yes, they've walked these islands for many years, but we still don't know what man was doing on these islands many years ago. It still remains a mystery, and these academics, archaeologists, still don't know themselves, and they still don't know why all this sherds of Neolithic material were thrown into the loch, whether broken on purpose or whether just normal breakages like you would find nowadays from a kitchen, and say, oh, into the water it goes, into the water it goes. We don't know these things, but in some of the lochs, the amount of shares that are lying there is just unbelievable. It's just, they were perhaps deliberately broken and put into the loch as a ritual. Perhaps. I'd like to think about it anyway.
But in a sense, where we have some evidence, we are only starting asking the questions. We're still looking for some of the answers. But you have let's look at some of the items you have here. Tell me the story of what they are, what you think they are, and what we're actually seeing.
Well, what we have here is Neolithic pottery. By the way, most of these pieces have been C14 dated, and when I say C14 dated, I mean carbon dated to approximately 5,500 years old, and they've been residue tested as well, and we've found just exactly what the people were cooking in these pots. So it's just amazing. Now these shells have been marked by probably a feather or a bird bone, and a lot of them have been scallop shaped. The pots have been scallop shaped. Other ones not scallop shaped, but they nearly all had round bottoms. They all had round base on the pots like that. Yeah.
What's fascinating for someone maybe like myself seeing them for the first time is the patterns that are on there.
Yeah, patterns. And on the bigger shells, you can see that on the rims, maybe not so much on that one, but on this one here, you can see that the rim itself has been decorated. And as I say, there's never one rim shell, as I call it, the same. There's all a little bit of difference between each one, and different people, different patterns. You can see a different hand that has shaped all these beautiful decorations on ceramics. Yeah, just beautiful. This is a piece of early Neolithic pottery. I believe, looking at this at a glance, that it is part of an Unston bowl used for cooking. And as you can see, it's been decorated, not with paint, but probably by a bird's feather or a bird bone. And as a lot of the other Neolithic pieces have been decorated. So that is a piece of Unston bowl. This is another piece of Neolithic pottery, and again, as you can see, it's been decorated all around the top. The rim has been decorated also. It's very difficult to see in this piece here, but I'll show you another one, which is here. There we are, there's the rim. If you can see that in the rim, that's been decorated as well. Beautifully decorated. And there's a bit of residue over the outside of this bit, but it's not bad considering it's been in the water for 5,500 years. This is another piece of Neolithic, early Neolithic pottery. When I say early Neolithic, probably about 5,500 years old. Right? Beautiful rim in it, beautiful decoration. Again, broken, as most of the pieces are broken. There's one piece there. Another piece, you can see the rim of this piece here has been decorated. The sides have been decorated. In fact, this one here, it's been shaped as if scallop shaped. So the bowl would have been scallop shaped all the way down to a round bottom. It would have a round bottom, but for some reason they had it scallop shaped. You can see that.
It's amazing that they were actually making these pots here at that time, that they had the know-how to make the pots.
Yes, they obviously had the know-how to make the pots, and they would collect clay from probably the loch where the cranach has been, and they would bake that clay and they would fire it, believe it or not, what they reckon nowadays, by using dried sheep poo. So they would make their own furnaces, and they could get the furnaces up to a huge high temperature using that dry sheep poo. Now the reason I know this is because one of the archaeologists, a gentleman called Mike Copper, he has done this, and he's made replicas of all these types of Neolithic pots, and he's done them the way that he reckoned that they've done it in Neolithic times, and it's proved very successful. Yeah.
Well, the patterns are actually very fancy, you know, and some of them kind of quite intricate when you consider how few tools they had at the time.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's, as I said, it's just a bird feather or a bird bone that they used for decorating that clay, yeah. And every loch that we found that material in, Neolithic material, most of it is really about the same kind of decoration, or it's close decoration to each loch. Yeah.
This one here has a combination of both. It's got the rim, and it's got the intricate designs. There's the rim.
Yes, that's right. They spent a lot of time actually working on these pots and making these pots, and it seemed to me like they worshipped these pots. So maybe it was something like a Roman sword, and they spent hours and hours and hours and hours making these things, or days making these things, and then perhaps they just like smash them up and throw them into the water to appease their gods, or whatever rituals that they decided to carry out. We don't know these things, but they're doing their best to try and find out. And the guys from down south, Dr. Duncan Garrow and Dr. Fraser Sturt, they are really going at this tooth and nail to try and find out just what has been going on, although it's very difficult, and it's doubtful whether they ever will find out what has been going on.
So did these ones all come from the same loch?
Yes, these are all from all these bits there, the small pieces are from Loch Duna in North Lochs, yes. The smaller pieces are found in that loch, yeah. Mm-hmm. The larger pieces, hopefully, are going to come back here this year later on.
Now tell me about some of the other pieces you did get. You got bigger ones on this, didn't you?
Yes, the first ones I found in Loch Duna, they were pieces about beer-size, with quarter pots, to half pots, and as I say, they were beautifully decorated, and that was the one. That's the first pieces I found on the island of Lewis. And
where are they now?
They are in Edinburgh at the moment. They went to Treasure Trove, although they've never actually been passed through Treasure Trove. And there is a new team of archaeologists there now, and they're working alongside me and the archaeologists down south. And it's hopeful that they said they're going to maybe send them back up. Well, they said they would be sending them back up north to the islands here to allocate to museums where they should belong, and that's exactly where they should be.
Well, indeed. Now, they have a value in terms of history, but presumably some of them have a value in terms of money as well.
I have no idea about the monetary value of these things. I don't know how you can put a value on these bits and pieces. I have no idea whatsoever. Nobody's mentioned any monetary value to me, and what is actually going to happen when they're handed across, I don't know. They said that they're going to try and get them allocated to the different museums in Stornoway. Not Stornoway, but I mean around Lewis here, along with a lot of arrowheads I found at Barbas many years ago as well. But I know that the treasure trove, it's a legal process. Now yes, if it's going to go through the treasure trove, any museum that is wanting the stuff would have to buy it off treasure trove. That's the legal way it works. And as I say, I don't know what's going to happen in the future with this or whatever, what they would actually, what each piece is worth, and is a bigger piece worth than a smaller, worth more than a smaller piece, or which way it's going to go, I don't know. I leave that to the people that decide these things to decide it.
Now, what about these little ones there? What are they?
Well, I was asked by Anna and Ken Roddy to have a look in a loch, Loch Baltas, I believe it was, a couple of years ago, on a small island that appeared in a drought, during a drought. And I was swimming around in the weed and the mud, and I couldn't find anything there. So I took off my fins and I was having a wander about the island, and I found this bit here, which I'm not sure. I think it possibly could be a a flint blade, but it's quite difficult to say, but I think it could be a flint blade. And this piece of pottery here, which is, I would say, probably Iron Age pottery, that, you know, this piece here, but it's uncertain. Also another piece of flint, seems to be a piece of flint, yeah. That could be a thumbnail scraper, possibly a thumbnail scraper.
Oh, yes.
And this piece here, well, I think the other piece here is possibly just a piece of stone actually, but I'm not sure if it's a stone tool or not, but yeah. But as I say, that little...
How old will these be?
Probably about 2,000 years, I would say. It's difficult, you can't really tell with flint. It could be 10,000, 20,000 with flint, you don't know. You can't carbon date flint as far as I know, but with the pottery that can be carbon dated, and I think it probably, maybe about 2,000 years old. I'm just suggesting that. I don't really know what to say. I'm not an archaeologist. I don't have the means to verify that stuff at the moment, I'm afraid.
But, so this is only a small part of what you've found, isn't it?
This is only a tiny little part of it, yes.
Tell me about the rest of it, you know.
Well, the rest of it is, a lot of it is down in Bristol University. They've just completed the residue testing down there with a lot of the stuff, and that's in the hands of, as I say, Duncan Garrow and Fraser Sturt at the moment, and I asked them to hang on to it until we find out what the decision is from Treasure Trove. I said it'd be more professional for them to hold on to it rather than just hand the whole lot back to me and then, you know, okay, what do I do now? Because, as I say, the law is the law and I have to abide by the law. And they said, well, probably that's the best way, but we will hang on to it and we're not going to pass it anywhere else. We're going to hang on to it until we get advice from the people at Edinburgh. I've got maybe 3 or 4 boxes of the stuff down there that they're holding on to. It has been carbon dated, it has been residue tested, and as I say, they know what was cooking in these pots all that time ago. Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask you. You've used the term residue tested a few times. I take it that means they've tried to work out what was in the pots.
That's correct, yes.
And what have they found out?
Pardon?
What have they found out?
Well, what I do know, I don't know about the stuff they found out they have in Bristol at the moment or passed on to Duncan Garrow, but there's a pot I found in Loch, which is called an Anston bowl, and it's a cooking pot, and I found that a few years back. It was about maybe 73% intact, and as rare as hen's teeth up here really. And that eventually went for residue testing, and the results were quite astonishing. I didn't know what the results were until one day I picked up the paper and I saw the Daily Record, I believe, and the Daily Express, the oldest bowl, porridge bowl ever. They found the residue of milk and oats in the pores of this Anston bowl. And add the two together, you've got porridge, oats and milk. And I wasn't told anything about it until such times I read in the paper. So, yeah.
So when you were told to eat this porridge as a wee boy, there was strong historical evidence for that, of how it would have done that over many years.
Yes.
Hey, how do you feel about this? Because this basically is it started off as a retirement hobby for you anyway. How do you feel about it all?
Well, I feel thrilled to bits about everything. And I'll be even more thrilled to bits if this assemblages come back to the island of Lewis. That is the end game. That's the end result I want. When all this stuff comes back, and somebody can show off in the museum, and just say where it came from. Well, we know it came from the island of Lewis, and a little story behind it. And I'll be a happy man then. I don't intend stopping now. I want to continue. And I have been diving up in Ness, in a loch in Ness, and do have some stuff on display up there at the moment, including a bone awl and a blade, a stone blade for butchering and skinning, yeah. And that's on display as well. Now that blade is the first one I had found of that type, and I'm very happy to say, I'm proud to say that's on display up there just now.
I think I've seen that actually.
It's called a scale knife, by the way.
Yeah, and you can imagine it as well. But it does give you an insight, you know, just the kind of life that people led, what they did for a living, you know, and in a sense sheds a little bit of light on a time which we know very little about.
We don't know very much about it at all. All we know is a different climate then was. I did say to the boys one day, to the other archaeologists, I said, why on earth would they live out here in this island with the midges and the clegs and they get bitten all over, and you know, it just seems a place, and there is the remains of willow around some of these islands. So it wasn't peat and all that then. The peat would be just forming in some of these lochs, around some of these lochs at that time. But there is evidence because of hammerstones and the smoothing stones are found on the island and in the water around them, that yeah, they have been just working as a little community there, you know, pounding away and making a meal for themselves and cutting trees and whatever, skinning and, you know, so it wasn't all just something to do with religious or some other sort of rites they were using these islands for. As I say, we don't really know as such, but some of these islands are so small, so tiny, we can't imagine why they'd be on them anyway, really. Some people say that, oh no, the water level was about 15 feet above that once upon a time. That's nonsense. There's no way that happened at all. The water level is what it is now, and we've discussed that and tested that theory, but the water level hasn't changed much on the island.
Of course, the geography of the islands itself has changed when you look at the monarchs, which were once tied to Euston and all these places. You know, the geography of the place has changed also, and things are coming to view as we have more and more erosion around our coasts and that kind of thing. But in a sense, what you've done here is hugely important. And in a sense, like the videos we're doing just now, they are interesting for the time being. But in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, when we're no longer here, the story of how it all started will be here.
That's right. It will be. That's right, yeah.
And you're the man who started it. Well,
fair enough. But people say to me, okay, the sea level has changed over the last 5,000 years. Well, I said that's the sea level, but not the lochs. The lochs haven't changed in millennium. No, just they are what they are, and there's been no change there whatsoever.
And the thing is, if over the next year or two, if people see strange sightings out on the move somewhere, they don't need to report it to the police. It's you looking for more bits of pottery.
That's right. Probably so.
Well, can I thank you very much indeed for kindly agreeing to share some of this with you, your own history, how it all started, and the hope that there is much more of it to be found, and that will be shown in the islands here. Thanks very much indeed, Chris.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.